Nuevas tendencias y oportunidades de mercado. Mejora tu ROI invirtiendo en canales de alto impacto. Amplía tu cuota de mercado descifrando las tácticas de crecimiento de tus rivales. Consigue la máxima ventaja en el mercado con decisiones basadas en datos. SEMrush Trends. Conocimientos más profundos.
So first of all, need your attention. ¿Cómo están los máquinas? Brilliant. No idea what I just said. Anyway, thank you so much for coming along today. So my talk is called Client and Stakeholder Satisfaction Guaranteed, or Your Money Back. That said, I'm fairly confident that you won't be asking SECO and the disorganisation team for a refund after this. The reason being that I'm going to talk about why it's important to measure client and stakeholder satisfaction and 2 ways in which you should do it that complement each other and help give you the full picture. So first of all, a bit of background about me. I'm basically an operations and project management geek. So I've been working as an operations director in digital marketing agencies since 2017. I'm now the operations and events director for the ENG Centre. And we accelerate and de-risk agencies' growth, giving you more time, more money, less stress, more quickly. I'm also Prince 2 and Prince 2 Agile Qualified Practitioner, which are project management qualifications. And prior to this, I actually worked in customer satisfaction research, which is why I've chosen to talk to you about this today. So to begin with, what are we talking about when we're talking about satisfaction? What we're not talking about is a gut feeling. What we are talking about is something that's measurable, so it can be quantified over time, something that's structured, so you've got a known measure of satisfaction and the why behind it, and also something that's easy for everyone to understand, so it's a clear and simple measure. So why measure client and stakeholder satisfaction? Why should we care? First and foremost, it's a great tool for retaining and upselling clients. It's also a great way of maintaining positive relationships with clients and stakeholders. You can use it to identify opportunities, and then in turn, if you're measuring satisfaction, you can measure the impact of any changes you make on the business. So in order to get the most impact, we need to use 2 types of measures. So first of all, we've got leading measures, which tell us if we're on track to hit our targets. So for example, monitoring our own performance or client behaviours. And then we've got lagging measures, which tell us the level of performance achieved. So examples of that might be results to a client and stakeholder satisfaction survey, as that tells you where you performed. So what I'm going to do now is talk more about how leading and lagging measures can be used to measure client satisfaction, starting with leading measures. Okay, so leading measures are important as they tell us if a client is unhappy or likely to become unhappy, so we can then take action accordingly. In terms of what make good leading measures, first of all, they should help us to predict satisfaction, and know what to look for comes with experience. So I'll give some examples shortly. They all should also be easy to complete, so use information that's easy to get hold of or be a simple yes-no response. And they should also be objective. So again, either measurable or a yes-no response. Not it depends, which I know is a popular response amongst SEOs. Okay, so probably the most obvious first set of leading measures we need to understand if a client's like to be happy, are leading measures of performance. So in SEO, we need to make sure we're measuring impressions and CTR to know we're on track to meet our traffic targets. In PPC, We need, again, measuring impressions and CTR to know we're on track to meet our conversion target. And then when it comes to link building, we want to be monitoring outreach and open rate to know we're on track to meet our link score target. And then there's also like other behaviours that we should be looking for, both from a client's perspective and from our perspective. So first of all, this first one overlaps a bit with the performance, but for clients, we should make sure we're measuring the percentage of our recommendations they're able to implement. So from a technical perspective, on page, off page, because it might be we're doing all of this fantastic work, but actually it's not being implemented, which is going to cause problems later on. So we need to make sure we're measuring that. Also monitoring a client's attending calls. It might sound obvious, but if they keep rescheduling or they're not showing up, then we know there's an issue with the relationship that needs to be addressed. And also, have they actually flagged any issues with the service or deliverable? So rather than it being something that, okay, they're not happy with something, we need to be recording that and acting on it. And also from our perspective, so looking at what we're doing. So for example, do we actually understand the client's business? And by this I mean, have we asked the right questions? Have they given us the information we need? Because often what happens when we start off with a relationship, we spend so much time onboarding the clients, but we need to have those conversations ongoing and make sure that we're keeping up to date. Also, are we delivering everything we promised to the client? Not only in terms of the contract, but also in terms of any promises we've made, because that can have an impact too. And then also, have we directly addressed any issues that have been flagged? So once you've got all these different leading measures, performance, behaviours, we need to make sure we're measuring them ongoing. So for example, monthly basis, measuring on track or off track. And then for any clients where we've got areas that are off track, working with the account manager to create a plan to address that. The other thing I'd say as well, we shouldn't just be looking at leading measures on a client level, but actually looking at them on an aggregated level. The reason being, when you do that, you can start to see patterns in terms of what's happening across the business, and that can help you understand if there's something that needs to be addressed at business level. So a really good example of this, in a previous company that I worked at, when we aggregated the results, we actually saw that a high proportion of our clients were having trouble implementing recommendations. When we dug down into that, we saw it was a mixture of, on page. So for example, they might not have had the copywriting resource to get that written, but also technical as well. So the key thing with that is normally they needed a developer, they couldn't get their work prioritised. So from our point of view, that was really helpful. So we were able to think, okay, in terms of the resource we deliver on a monthly basis, we're going to allocate a higher percentage to copywriting with our internal copywriter. And then from a technical perspective, that was making sure there was a more business case up in terms of our deliverables up front, but also making sure that we developed a relationship with their developers earlier on and understood their relationship more. Okay, so next up, lagging measures. So as I said earlier, an example of lagging measures, they tell us the level of performance we've achieved. So an example of that would be results to a client and stakeholder satisfaction survey. So what do you need to think about when putting together a survey? Well, the first thing I'd say is start with the end in mind. So you want to make sure you're measuring satisfaction over time, you're getting a why behind the scores, and you're also getting some actionable recommendations from it. We also need to make sure we consider our audience. So the types of questions we're going to ask are going to be different if you're speaking to a member of the leadership team versus day-to-day contact. And then also in terms of, remember, less is more in this case. So by that I mean you want to balance, collating information versus actually keeping the survey really short and simple, otherwise people won't complete it. Okay, so an example of a question you can use to measure satisfaction is this. So how likely are you to recommend our company to a friend or colleague on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is very unlikely and 10 is very likely? So there's lots of different questions you can use to measure satisfaction. This is just one of them. But the reason I've included this, it's an example of the NPS or Net Promoter Score question, which is great for a couple of key reasons. So first of all, it's proven to be a good predictor of a company's organic growth. And also there's industry benchmarks available. So rather than just having a score in isolation and measuring your own over time, you can also actually compare to how you're comparing to others in the industry, which is super useful. Okay, and then very briefly, and I mean very briefly because NPS could be a whole talk in itself, but the way we calculate NPS is we take the percentage of respondents rating us 0 to 6 for likelihood to recommend, away from the percentage rating us 9 or 10. So it is quite a tough measure. If anyone wants to talk about this in more detail afterwards, I'm happy to. I'm going to be having a Tinto di Verano in my hand, 100%, but more than happy. I cannot wait for that drink. Okay. So once you've asked your satisfaction question, it's then useful to follow it with a couple of other questions. So you should ask why they gave the score they did. So you've got the context behind the score. And then also ask them what is it they can specifically do to improve the service the company delivers to make sure you are getting some actionable recommendations. So far that's 3 questions. Satisfaction, why you gave the score you did, and what can we do to improve the service. So you might be thinking, okay, is that it? Just 3 questions? And actually I would say to begin with, yes. The reason being, the first few times you send out a survey, with the responses to these 2 questions, you'll start to get a feel for what's important to your clients. So why did they give that score? What is it you can do better? And then once you know that, that's when you can start measuring that separately to make sure you've got the key things, you know how you're performing amongst those key areas. So for example, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements? I'm satisfied with the work the company's doing. The company understands our business. And the reason you'll know that you're measuring the areas that are actually important to your client is because those that are highly likely to recommend you, so rate you 9 or 10, are going to rate you significantly higher in these areas than those that rate you 0 to 6, so your detractors. In terms of when to send the survey out, you want to send it out after a key interaction. So if you're working on a project, that might be at the end of the project. Or if you're working on a monthly retainer, like a lot of us do, then you're probably looking at something like after a quarterly business review. And in terms of frequency, so you want to make it frequent enough to monitor perceptions, but then also give yourself time to make changes. So that's where something like every 3 or 6 months is a good middle ground. Okay, so you've sent out your survey, you've got your feedback, great. How do we action it in the business? So this is obviously the important stuff, this is why we're doing it. The first thing I'd say is make sure you share it with your team, even if it's not all positive. The reason being, it engenders trust and buy-in. And also, obviously, different people in the team have different roles, different interactions, so it's good to get their feedback. Then in relation to that, you want to make sure you brainstorm with the team. That's often really useful. And then if you've done this before, especially face-to-face, you'll be in a room and you'll be like surrounded by post-its and you're like, this is great, we're brilliant, this is going to be so much fun, which is good, but then we need to make sure we prioritise the key things to make sure they get done. So we need to prioritise based on the effort involved and obviously the expected impact on customer satisfaction. And then we need to make sure we agree actions, we know who's going to deliver what and by when, to maintain traction and accountability. And then finally, we need to make sure we actually measure the impact of what we're doing. If we're making all these changes, great, but we need to know the actual impact it's having. So that's where we can use our leading and lagging measures ongoing. The other thing to note about actioning the feedback, I think a key reason a lot of us send out these surveys is for a PR perspective. Because obviously it's really good to say, hey, you know, this is how much our clients love us. So the other thing I'd say it's useful, for example, you can write a blog or put out a PR piece just talking about this is how likely our clients are to recommend us, this is what we do well, this is what we can do better, this is what we're doing about it. So from a client's perspective, that's great because they can see you're positively improving your service ongoing. And also they're more likely to give you feedback moving forward. But also for prospective clients as well, that's great because they get transparency into how you actually work. And same with team members as well, because you know, for a lot of people, for a lot of us, it's really important that we work with someone that genuinely values our clients. So super important. Okay, so I'm hoping there's a few people here that are thinking, okay, I don't currently measure satisfaction amongst my clients and stakeholders. but I can see the value, and this is something that I want to start doing. So what tools can I use to do this? So you can keep it super, super simple. Use something like Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, free and easy to use. The limitation being that you are going to have to create the survey yourself and the reporting, and that can take a little bit of time to get set up when you start to look at the results over time. All those survey tools available, SurveyMonkey type forms, Zoho forms. Again, these are great. The templates are set up for your survey and reporting, support available if you need it, nice and easy. But yeah, probably some level of investment involved, like most things in life. Okay, so I'm conscious that people probably want me to take a while over this slide. Okay, just to summarise the key points. So in terms of measuring satisfaction, super important to maintain positive relationships and support business growth. Make sure you use a mixture of leading and lagging measures to proactively and reactively spot opportunities. And when measuring satisfaction, make sure you start with the end in mind and keep it simple. Okay, I mean, this probably counts as a slide, but yeah, thank you. What's that? I went a bit quick. Come on!